Liz, are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
Wonderful. So my first question is, how did you get on to this method of pattern cutting? How did it come up in your life?
Well, over 20 years ago now, I was working as a costume supervisor at Bretton Hall College. And while I was there, I had a performance student come to me, and she had a very large bust, and she was playing a 5-year-old, and she said, "Can you help? I need something." And I'd heard something about people using masking tape and old t-shirts to restrict people and try and make patterns. So I put an old t-shirt on her, I gaffed her chest down, and then I drew basic seam lines, centre front, centre back on it, and cut her out of it. And then I basically cut it up till this mould that I made laid flat on the surface. I made her basically a restricted corset, I suppose, with a mixture of lacing and elastic. And it was a very quick thing, and I actually did it for speed, and that's why I used the method. But in doing it, I thought, hang on a minute, as costume makers, we pad up dummies to look the same shape and size as the performer, and then we tend to do a lot of pattern cutting over it, or we draft to specific sizes. How about if we actually, rather than did that and went to fittings, is there some way of using this mold making technique? And then it got shelved and left because I didn't have time to do anything about it. And then about 8 years ago, I started on my MA, and I needed a topic to research, and I thought, that's what I'm going to go for. I'll go down that route. And I worked with Kevin, who was my supervisor, who was fantastic, who then guided me through my research with that.
Oh, wonderful. So what exactly is this second skin pattern cutting? How does it work?
Right. Well, there's areas where it does work, to be honest, and there's areas where it doesn't. But basically, what I started by doing was covering people and things with cling film and masking tape. So the basics are that you cover whatever it is you want to make a pattern from with a thin layer of cling film, then use masking tape and absolutely cover it completely with masking tape. And then you can draw your seam lines on. It's easier if you draw the seam lines while it's on the 3D object, because then you can judge where you want the seam lines to be. Do lots of balance marks, lots of photographs, cut it out, and basically if the pattern lays flat on a surface, then it lay flat on your fabric and you can stitch it together, and should then reproduce the mould, the shape of the mould that you produced in the first place. That's the basics of it.
Okay, I see. And so you said sometimes it works better for some things than others. Can you enlighten us what it works best for and what it doesn't work so great with?
Well, I used a few different things. I made a few different things out of it. So one of the first things I did when I started to go back to it is I thought, well, I'll cover a whole torso. So I had a very nice neighbour who agreed to come over and be covered in cling film and masking tape, which wasn't overly comfortable. And then I drew lines all over her and produced the mould, and then I cut her out of it. The problem was I created some really exciting pattern cut, which on the torso, but actually, as I was cutting her out of it, I realised where the problems would lie, because when you got into the armhole, I had to cut it open so much to get her out of it. It became obvious that she was never going to be able to put it back on. The second skin, the research I did was looking at using this pattern cutting technique for non-stretch fabric. That was the thing. If you're using stretch fabric, you can get away with the pattern cut being a bit tighter and not being a complete mould. So for that, it wasn't working as a garment, it was working as taking a good cut. But the places that it did work that were really interesting was I did hats and I did hoods and things like that, and that's where it became quite interesting. Is it worth me showing you some images of that now? Or
oh yeah, yes please, let's have a look.
Okay, so if I just show you.
Okay. Wonderful.
Right, okay. So the places where this is the bodice piece, if you can see that. So as you can see, it's very tight around the armhole. The lovely thing is you've got some really nice shapes. And in fact, this piece here, if you can see that, travels round the arm, and it's actually the same pattern piece that works right the way down the arm as far as the cuff.
Wow.
Which is amazing, which was really exciting. And we've got the pattern pieces drifting right the way around. But as I say, the problem is you then have to think of ways of them getting in and out. And the only thing you could do is maybe put a zipper or fastening right the way down the arm because it's too tight. When I came to looking at things like that, so I did a skull cap. And what I tried to do is to make patterns that you couldn't traditionally make very easily on the flat. So this is what I did for the skull cap. So I literally just covered the hat block in cling film and then in masking tape and drew the lines direct on it. Yes, in some places you did need to put a little bit ease in your fabric as it went on. And I did manage to use some quite unusual fabric actually. It's like a really fine double fused fabric that didn't fray, which was helpful in doing that. So that worked quite well. I then did covered my husband in cling film and masking tape, or at least his head. And I then realised that I needed something to draw on.
Right.
So I actually made a plaster cast of his head, and then I put the mould that I'd made in cling film and masking tape onto the plaster cast. But what I found is when I did the plaster cast of his head, he actually fell asleep while he was being cast because it was warm and dark. So his head in the plaster cast is slightly lowered to what it was when he was had the original mould done. So I actually had to cut the face out and do that separate. Because the two weren't matching up because of the angle of the head. But as an actual pattern for making the hood and for things like going around the ears and things, it worked really, really well. And I've had students use it since for that reason. The reason the fabric on the front, by the way, is the wrong way out round with the is inside out, is actually because when you come to lay the pattern on, obviously you need to think about which way down you put it on, and it is a bit of a head screw because of the way the mould works. It actually needs to go on, instead of putting it on, it needs to go the other way around to what you think. But actually, if you put this mask on the right way around, it doesn't fit the cast because, of course, he's not got a symmetrical face. So that was that one. And then this one, just to show you, is the top hat. Now, sadly, I decided to do it in stripy fabric because I thought I'd get some exciting lines, but they weren't as exciting as I would have liked. So I wish I'd kept with the plain fabric, but there's a lot of seams in this because actually the pattern piece, it's the same pattern piece that goes from the top right the way down the sides, over the brim and to the inside. So this is one pattern piece and that's it.
Wow.
So it's done the same way. The only slight issue I have with this is it's very loose around the bottom. And that's basically, I think, because of all the, just drawing around the pattern pieces, you've got so many seams in there. I mean, I haven't counted them, but there must be over about 30 or 40. That width has made it a little bit wide. So that's that, which I can show you an image of the pattern piece of that later if you wish. So as I say, in some places, it tends to work on things that aren't tight around the body. Sorry, that aren't involving limbs, should I say.
Right.
I did also use it again to produce a bust suppressor. And I used it for a kind of Tudor corset where I incorporated a piece of card in it. I did try and use it for a 19th century corset, so I tried to use it to manipulate the body and to pull the waist in and lift the bust. But actually what I found, I tried to do it to start with somebody without a bra on, and it was just, it wasn't really doing it. It wasn't taking the shape. Okay. So that's the pattern for the top hat. So that's it covered in the masking tape and cling film. So you can see I did
Originally, I thought I'd do something exciting on the top, but obviously you're going to have an issue here with the seam allowance going into such a fine point.
Mm-hmm.
And then through drawing this on and playing with it, I thought, hang on a minute, I don't need any of that. That can be the same fabric. So this is the pattern it ended up being. In fact, if I'd uncurled it, unfortunately it's not uncurled in the picture, that goes into some more darts there.
Right.
Around the inside. So that's the pattern piece for that. This is your pattern piece for the hat that I showed you earlier.
Right, yeah.
And then just heading back, this was the bust suppressor. So this is the
Oh, wow.
to start with. We bound her down, and this is what we ended up with making.
And that's one layer of fabric, the finished garment?
This one,
Yeah.
no, it's seamed. We seamed it through the front.
I see.
And I think I might have added a seam in there, but no, I seamed it. But the idea was that it would end up pushing the bust down, getting rid of the bust, which for some instances in costume you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can't believe how well that's worked.
Yeah, yeah, and it is very quick as well.
Yeah, because one of the things that I read in your article that really struck me in particular was how even for sort of quite generic things, the fitting process was so much more efficient because you knew it was going to fit a lot better than if you'd done a flat draft or you'd padded up a stand or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, because obviously you're getting an exact copy from, as a mould, you are getting an exact copy of what you've taken the mould from. Obviously there's no ease in there, which I know for fashion garments is obviously a different thing, but for a lot of the stuff that we do, it is very fitted, and that was the idea, was to see where that can be worked. But as I say, particularly for things like hats and hoods, gaiters, I've had students do from it as well. Things like that, it's been really useful.